cub locked in a dumpster. A baby's one-word plea forced the town mayor to act. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The evening sun cast long shadows across Pine Haven's community park as Ruby Chen pushed her daughter's stroller along the winding path. 4-month-old Lily babbled happily, her tiny fingers reaching for the golden leaves drifting down from the maple trees. Ruby paused, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. These evening walks had become their special ritual since moving to this small town 3 months ago. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" called out an elderly man walking his golden retriever. Ruby recognized him as Mr. Finley, their neighbor from down the street. His weathered face crinkled into a smile as he approached. "It really is," Ruby replied, adjusting Lily's blanket against the growing chill. "We're trying to enjoy these last warm days before winter arrives." Mr. Finley nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Smart thinking. First snow usually hits before Thanksgiving around here." His dog sniffed curiously at the stroller wheels, tail wagging gently. As they chatted, a series of sharp, distressed cries pierced the peaceful evening. Ruby frowned, scanning the tree line. "Did you hear that?" "Sounds like an animal in trouble," Mr. Finley said, his expression darkening. His dog's ears perked up, head turning toward the sound. The cries came again, more urgent this time. Ruby felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Something about those sounds stirred a protective instinct deep within her. Lily, usually content to watch the world from her stroller, suddenly grew restless, her small face scrunching with concern. "I'd better check it out," Ruby said, her heart quickening. "It sounds close to the creek." Mr. Finley hesitated. "Be careful, dear. Could be anything out there. Want me to come along?" Ruby glanced at her watch. Nearly dusk, the shadows growing longer. "We'll be quick," she assured him. "The path circles back to the main road anyway." With a reluctant nod, Mr. Finley continued on his way, his dog glancing back over its shoulder. Ruby steered the stroller toward the creek path, following the distressed sounds that grew louder with each step. The narrow trail dipped down toward Willow Creek, where a small wooden bridge spanned the gentle waters. Ruby slowed as she approached, straining to locate the source of the cries. Lily had gone oddly quiet, her wide eyes fixed on something ahead. That's when Ruby saw it. A small fox kit trapped on a narrow ledge beneath the bridge, its russet fur slick with creek water. The little creature pawed desperately at the slippery stone, unable to climb back up the steep embankment. Each time it tried, it slid closer to the water, rushing below. "Oh no," Ruby whispered, her throat tightening. The kit couldn't be more than a few weeks old, its frightened eyes reflecting the fading daylight. But something wasn't right. Where was its mother? Fox kits rarely wandered alone. Ruby carefully parked the stroller on level ground and peered over the bridge railing. The kit spotted her and pressed itself flat against the ledge, trembling visibly. Its plaintive cries weakened to whimpers. "It's okay, little one," Ruby said softly, though she knew her presence likely terrified the wild animal more. She scanned the area for signs of an adult fox, wondering if approaching would do more harm than good. Lily suddenly let out a peculiar sound, not her usual babble, but something more deliberate. "Ma," she said clearly, pointing her tiny finger toward the trapped kit. "Ma!" Ruby stared at her daughter in astonishment. At 4 months, Lily had never formed anything resembling a word before. "Ma?" Ruby repeated, wondering if she'd imagined it. "Ma," Lily insisted, her face serious, finger still pointing at the stranded fox kit. The kit cried out again, a desperate sound that made Ruby's decision clear. She couldn't leave it to drown or freeze in the growing darkness. But how to help without frightening it further? And where was its family? As Ruby contemplated her next move, a twig snapped in the underbrush nearby. She turned quickly, instinctively moving to shield her daughter's stroller. The bushes rustled, and Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs. Something was watching them from the gathering dusk, its presence felt rather than seen. Ruby squared her shoulders, suddenly aware of how vulnerable they were on this isolated stretch of path. With darkness falling and a wild animal, perhaps the kit's anxious mother, potentially viewing them as a threat. The bushes parted, and Ruby held her breath as a pair of amber eyes emerged from the shadows. A large red fox stepped cautiously into view, its coat blazing copper in the last rays of sunlight. It froze, assessing Ruby with intelligent eyes, then yipped softly. The trapped kit responded immediately, its cries growing frantic. "That's your baby, isn't it?" Ruby whispered, her grip tightening on the stroller handle. The mother fox's gaze flicked between Ruby and the kid, conflicted between fear of humans and desperation to reach her young. Lily made that strange sound again, louder this time. "Ma! Ma!" She waved her arms excitedly, seeming to understand the situation better than any 4-month-old should. The mother fox startled at Lily's outburst, backing slightly into the bushes. Ruby saw indecision in those wild eyes. Trust the humans and approach, or flee and abandon her kit. "We want to help," Ruby said in a soothing voice, though she knew the animal couldn't understand her words. Slowly, she reached for her phone to call animal control, then hesitated. By the time they arrived, it might be too late for the kit, which was struggling to maintain its precarious position. The fox took a tentative step forward, then stopped as headlights swept across the path. A truck was approaching on the nearby service road. Ruby recognized Oliver Blackwood's forest green pickup. The town's wildlife officer was making his evening rounds. "Oliver!" Ruby called out, waving to catch his attention. The mother fox darted back into the undergrowth as the truck slowed to a stop. Oliver stepped out, adjusting his Department of Natural Resources cap. "Ruby? Everything all right?" "There's a fox kit trapped under the bridge," she explained quickly, pointing to the ledge. "The mother's nearby but scared." Oliver grabbed a flashlight from his truck and joined Ruby at the railing, aiming the beam at the frightened kit. "Poor little guy. How long has he been down there?" "I don't know. We just found him," Ruby replied. "The mother won't come close while we're here, but I was afraid to leave in case." Oliver nodded grimly. "You did right. Water's rising with the rain we had yesterday. Another hour and that ledge might be underwater." Lily suddenly began to cry, not her usual fussy whimper, but heart-wrenching sobs that startled both adults. "Ma! Ma!" she wailed, her tiny face reddening with emotion. "She's been doing that," Ruby explained, bouncing the stroller gently. "I think she's trying to say Mom." Oliver's expression softened. "Smart kid. Recognizes another baby in trouble." He reached for the rescue kit he always kept in his truck. "I can get down there, but the mother might not take kindly to me handling her kit." As if understanding their dilemma, the mother fox reappeared at the tree line, pacing anxiously. Her eyes never left her struggling baby. "What if we create a bridge?" Ruby suggested suddenly. "Something the kit could climb up without us touching it?" Oliver considered this, then nodded. "Worth a try." He returned to his truck and came back with a narrow plank of wood. "Always keep extra supplies. Never know what you'll encounter in this job. Together, they carefully positioned the plank from the ledge to the embankment, creating a gentle ramp. The kit eyed it warily, still too frightened to move. "Now we back away," Oliver instructed. "Give Mama some space to help." They retreated several yards, Ruby wheeling the stroller behind a large oak tree. Lily had gone quiet again, her eyes wide and watchful. The minutes stretched as darkness settled fully over the park. Ruby began to worry they'd waited too long. Then, with graceful stealth, the mother fox emerged from the shadows. She approached the bridge cautiously, nose twitching as she tested the air. When she reached the ramp, she yipped softly, a sound of encouragement. The kit responded immediately, scrambling toward the wooden plank. Its first attempt to climb failed, tiny paws slipping on the damp wood. Ruby held her breath, fighting the urge to rush forward and help. The mother fox descended the ramp herself, her movements sure and deliberate despite the danger. She reached her kit, gently nuzzling it before gripping the scruff of its neck. With careful steps, she carried her baby up the plank to safety. "Would you look at that?" Oliver whispered, admiration clear in his voice. Once on solid ground, the mother fox set down her kit and thoroughly inspected it, licking its wet fur. The kit wobbled on unsteady legs, pressing against its mother's warmth. Lily let out a delighted squeal, clapping her pudgy hands together. At the sound, both foxes looked directly at them. For one breathtaking moment, Ruby felt a connection with the mother fox. Two parents, both fiercely protective of their young. Then, with a flick of her bushy tail, the mother fox led her kit into the safety of the forest, disappearing into the growing darkness. "Perfect timing," Oliver said, collecting his plank. "Another hour and we'd have had a tragedy." Ruby nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I'm just glad we were here." She looked down at Lily, who was sucking contentedly on her fist, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, and that someone knew just what to say. As they walked back to the main path, the evening stars emerging overhead, Ruby couldn't shake the feeling that something magical had transpired. Her daughter's first word hadn't been "Mama" or "Dada," but something far more powerful. A plea for another mother to find her child. Oliver helped Ruby load the stroller into her car. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "foxes mate for life. They're dedicated parents. That mother would have done anything to save her kid." "Some instincts cross all boundaries," Ruby replied, securing Lily in her car seat. Driving home through the quiet streets of Pine Haven, Ruby glanced in the rearview mirror at her daughter, now sleeping peacefully. "You did good today, little one," she whispered. "You reminded us all what it means to care." The following morning, Ruby awoke to find Oliver's truck parked outside her house. He was installing a small wooden sign at the edge of her property. "What's this?" she asked, stepping onto the porch with Lily in her arms. Oliver straightened up, looking slightly embarrassed. "Town's starting a wildlife corridor program. Thought your place would make a good beginning, being so close to the creek and all." He nodded toward Lily. "Consider it a thank you to our youngest wildlife advocate." The sign read, "Pine Haven Wildlife Passage, respecting all mothers." Ruby smiled, bouncing Lily gently. "What do you think, sweetheart? Ready to help some more animal families?" Lily gurgled happily, and Ruby could have sworn she heard a faint "ma" buried in her daughter's babble. In the distance, at the edge of the forest that bordered their backyard, a flash of russet caught Ruby's eye. A mother fox watching cautiously, her kit tumbling playfully at her feet. Their eyes met across the distance, and Ruby felt that same connection again, deeper than words, older than time. Some bonds, she realized, needed no translation. 3 days later, Ruby was preparing breakfast when her phone rang. Oliver's name flashed on the screen. "Ruby, I need your help," he said without preamble, his voice tight with urgency. "Remember our Fox family? There's trouble." Ruby's stomach clenched. What kind of trouble? Development companies started clearing land near the creek, right where their den must be. I've got reports of machinery moving in this morning. Oliver's frustration was palpable. The town council approved it months ago. I've been trying to reach Mayor Harrington, but he's avoiding my calls. Ruby glanced at Lily, who was contentedly mashing banana into her high-chair tray. "What can I do?" "You're good with words. The council's holding an emergency session at noon today. Someone needs to speak for the wildlife corridor before the bulldozers destroy more habitat." After hanging up, Ruby paced her kitchen, thoughts racing. She wasn't a public speaker, wasn't an environmental activist. She was just a single mom who happened to witness a fox rescue a lost kit. How could she possibly make a difference? Lily babbled from her high chair, smacking the tray with sticky hands. "Ma," she declared firmly, as if sensing her mother's turmoil. Ruby smiled despite her anxiety. "You're right, sweetheart, we have to try." By 11:30, Ruby had dropped Lily at Mrs. Peterson's house for emergency babysitting and was hurrying up the town hall steps. The imposing brick building had always intimidated her, a reminder that she was still an outsider in Pine Haven, having moved here just after Lily was born. Inside, the council chamber was already packed. Ruby spotted Oliver near the front, still in his DNR uniform, speaking intensely with a tall man in an expensive suit. She recognized Harrison Wells, CEO of Evergreen Development, from his billboards around town promising Pine Haven's premier luxury community. Mayor Edward Harrington called the meeting to order, his silver hair immaculately styled, his tone dispassionate. "We're here to address concerns about the Creek Ridge Development Project. Mr. Wells, please update the council." Wells strode to the podium with practiced confidence. "Evergreen Development has all necessary permits for the Creek Ridge project. We completed environmental impact studies last year. Construction has already begun, providing 40 new jobs to local workers." He smiled thinly. "While we appreciate Officer Blackwood's wildlife concerns, we cannot halt progress because of a few foxes." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Ruby noticed the chamber was divided, construction workers in one section, environmental advocates in another. The division in her new hometown was starker than she'd realized. When Oliver spoke, his passion was evident. The environmental study was conducted during winter. It missed vital spring breeding grounds. We've identified 3 endangered species in that area, including the spotted salamander. I'm requesting a 30-day stay to conduct a proper survey." Mayor Harrington shook his head. "Evergreen Development has followed all legal requirements. We cannot arbitrarily delay a multi-million-dollar investment in our community." "But what about our wildlife corridor initiative?" Oliver pressed. "The council approved that program last month." "On a provisional basis," the mayor corrected smoothly. "Subject to economic considerations." Ruby felt her hands trembling as the public comment period was announced. Before she could second-guess herself, she approached the microphone. "My name is Ruby Chen," she began, her voice shakier than she'd hoped. "I moved to Pine Haven because it promised balance, a place where my daughter could grow up experiencing nature, not just concrete and playgrounds." She described finding the fox kit, watching the mother's rescue, and how it had prompted her baby's first word. That narrow bridge over Willow Creek connects more than 2 pieces of land. It connects habitats, families, generations. Ruby took a deep breath. My daughter is learning what it means to be part of a community, not just a human one, but something larger. What are we teaching her if we destroy homes for profit, whether they belong to people or to foxes? She locked eyes with Mayor Harrington. Pine Haven can have development and still protect critical wildlife passages. All it takes is willingness to redesign, not bulldoze. My daughter spoke for those who can't speak for themselves. Shouldn't we, as adults, do the same? The room fell silent as Ruby returned to her seat, heart pounding. Had she overstepped? Made herself a target in a town where she was trying to build a new life? Harrison Wells approached the podium again, his smile now strained. Touching story, Miss Chen, but emotions don't build housing or create jobs. This town needs economic growth, not fox sanctuaries. What happened next changed everything. The council chamber doors burst open, and Mrs. Peterson rushed in, holding a fussing Lily. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she called out, her normally calm voice frantic, but she wouldn't stop crying. Kept saying that word over and over. "I thought you should." "Ma!" Lily cried, her small voice carrying through the stunned chamber. "Ma!" Ruby hurried to take her daughter, embarrassment flooding her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to the council, backing toward the exit. But Lily wasn't finished. As Ruby turned to leave, her daughter looked directly at Mayor Harrington and said with perfect clarity, "Help, not Ma. Help." The entire room froze. Lily had never said that word before. Ruby stared at her daughter in astonishment. Mayor Harrington removed his glasses slowly, his political mask slipping. "Did she just help?" Lily repeated, pointing her tiny finger toward the large map of Pine Haven displayed behind the council seats, specifically at the area marked for development. Harrison Wells laughed nervously. "Are we really going to let a baby dictate town planning?" But something had shifted in the room. Council member Eleanor Thompson, a grandmother of 5, was studying Lily with thoughtful eyes. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "we need the innocent to remind us of what matters." She turned to the mayor. "Edward, my motion is to suspend the Creek Ridge clearing for 30 days, pending a new environmental survey." "I second," said Councilman Rajiv Patel immediately. Mayor Harrington looked between Wells's thunderous expression and Lily's innocent face. After a long moment, he nodded. Motion carries. Outside the town hall, Ruby stood in disbelief as Oliver shook her hand vigorously. "You did it! 30 days gives us time to document everything and apply for protected status." "I didn't do anything," Ruby said, still stunned. "It was Lily." Oliver smiled. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the furthest. He hesitated, then added, "The council might have been swayed today, but Wells won't give up easily. This is just the beginning." Ruby nodded, suddenly aware of the weight of what had happened. She'd publicly challenged the town's most powerful developer. There would be consequences. As if confirming her fears, Harrison Wells brushed past them on the town hall steps, pausing just long enough to mutter, "Enjoy your victory, Miss Chen, it won't last." That night, after putting Lily to bed, Ruby sat on her porch swing, watching the tree line where she'd last seen the Fox family. Had she done the right thing? As a newcomer, was it her place to disrupt plans that had been in motion long before her arrival? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox." Cautiously, Ruby walked to the end of her driveway. Inside the mailbox was a thumb drive and a handwritten note. "You need to see this. Not everyone in town wants concrete over creeks." Back inside, Ruby plugged the drive into her laptop. It contained dozens of documents, internal Evergreen Development emails, soil testing results, and most damning of all, a revised environmental impact study that had never been submitted to the council. The study clearly identified the habitats of not just foxes but several endangered species, all conveniently omitted from the public filings. Ruby's hands shook as she scrolled through the documents. This was corporate fraud, deliberately concealing environmental data to push through development approvals. But who had sent it? And what was she supposed to do now? The next morning brought another surprise. Ruby opened her door to find a small crowd gathered on her front lawn. Mostly young families, some holding handmade signs. Save Willow Creek and Wildlife Corridors Matter. A woman stepped forward, introducing herself as Diana Sullivan. "We heard what you said at the council meeting. Some of us have been fighting this development for months, but nobody would listen." She gestured to the group. "We want to help." Ruby invited them inside, where her small living room quickly filled with passionate residents. She learned that Diana was a former environmental lawyer who'd moved to Pine Haven for its natural beauty. Martin Ochoa taught biology at the high school. Eliza Washington was a retired park ranger. "I have something to show you," Ruby said carefully, bringing out her laptop. As the group examined the leaked documents, their expressions shifted from surprise to outrage. "This is exactly what we suspected," Diana said, her professional demeanor cracking. "But how did you get these?" "Anonymously," Ruby admitted. "I don't know who sent them." Martin looked troubled. Using stolen documents could backfire legally, even if they prove wrongdoing. "Then we don't use them directly," Diana suggested. "We use them as a map to conduct our own surveys, gather our own evidence legally." As the impromptu strategy session continued, Ruby noticed Lily watching the proceedings from her playpen, those observant eyes taking in everything. Something nagged at Ruby's mind, her daughter's sudden vocabulary expansion, her seemingly impossible awareness of the forest's plight. Later that afternoon, while the others were coordinating survey teams, Ruby took Lily for a walk to clear her head. Without conscious decision, her feet carried them toward Willow Creek Bridge. The construction equipment stood silent due to the council's temporary stay, orange fencing marking the boundaries of the disputed territory. Ruby lifted Lily from the stroller, holding her close as they stood at the bridge railing. "What's happening with you, little one?" she whispered against her daughter's soft hair. "How did you know?" A flash of movement caught her eye. The mother fox, watching them from the shelter of a fallen log. Their eyes met across the distance, and Ruby felt again that inexplicable connection. The fox tilted her head, as if considering a difficult question, then disappeared into the underbrush. A moment later, she reappeared, but not alone. 6 more foxes emerged from different directions, converging near the creek bank. Ruby had never seen so many together. It wasn't natural fox behavior. They formed a semicircle, all watching Ruby and Lily with unusual intensity. "Impossible," Ruby breathed. Lily squirmed in her arms, pointing excitedly. "Help! Help!" The strange fox gathering dissolved as quickly as it had formed, the animals melting back into the forest. Ruby stood frozen, trying to process what she'd witnessed. One fox family using the wildlife corridor made perfect sense, but this many appearing together, watching them. That evening, as a summer storm rolled in, Ruby put Lily to bed and tried to make sense of everything. The leaked documents, the unexpected support from townspeople, and most disturbing of all, the strange behavior of the forest creatures. The heavy rain beat against her windows as Ruby spread the Creek Ridge development plans across her dining table. Something about the landscaping blueprints bothered her. She traced the planned water diversion channels, frowning as she followed their path. A crack of thunder made her jump, followed by the harsh ring of her doorbell. Ruby opened the door to find Oliver on her porch, drenched and grim-faced. "We have a problem," he said, water dripping from his DNR uniform. "The construction crews came back. Wells got a judge to issue an emergency override of the council's decision." "He can't do that." "He did," claims the delay is causing irreparable financial harm. "They're moving equipment in right now, planning to clear the whole area at dawn." Ruby felt the blood drain from her face. In this storm. That's dangerous. Exactly. The ground's already saturated. Any major excavation could destabilize the entire creek bed. Oliver ran a hand through his wet hair. "I've been trying to reach the mayor, the council, anyone with authority to stop this, but no one's answering." Ruby looked back at the development plans on her table, suddenly understanding what had been bothering her. "Oliver, look at this. The water diversion system they're planning. It doesn't account for the natural springs under Willow Creek." Oliver studied the plans, his expression darkening. "If they dig there—" He didn't need to finish. They both knew what could happen. A catastrophic collapse that would destroy not just wildlife habitat but potentially threaten homes downstream. "We need to stop them now," Ruby said, already reaching for her rain jacket. "Where's Lily going to stay? I can't bring her out in this." Oliver hesitated. "My mother lives just down the street. She can watch her while we deal with this." After settling Lily with Oliver's mother, a kind woman who assured Ruby that her granddaughter had already explained everything about the Fox emergency, they drove through the downpour toward the construction site. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Massive floodlights illuminated the muddy clearing where 3 bulldozers stood ready. Workers in rain gear were securing equipment while Harrison Wells stood under an umbrella, directing operations with aggressive hand gestures. Ruby and Oliver parked at the site entrance, where a security guard tried to block their path. "Official DNR business," Oliver said firmly, flashing his credentials. The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. Wells spotted them approaching and his face hardened. "Officer Blackwood, Miss Chen, this is private property under active construction. You need to leave immediately." "You can't begin clearing in these conditions," Oliver said, raising his voice over the storm. "The soil saturation levels. I have engineers who determine what conditions are appropriate." Wells cut him off. "And a court order permitting this work to proceed without interference." He smiled thinly. "Your wildlife concerns have been noted and dismissed." Ruby stepped forward, rain pelting her face. "This isn't just about wildlife. Your own plans don't account for the underground spring network. If you excavate here tonight, you risk a major landslide that could affect homes downstream." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Wells's face. Then his expression hardened again. "Another delay tactic. My engineers have conducted thorough geological surveys. Then you know about the aquifer convergence point directly beneath where you're planning to dig," Ruby challenged, drawing on the information from the leaked documents. Wells's pause told her everything. He hadn't known, or worse, had ignored the risk. "Stop work immediately while we verify the geological stability," Oliver demanded. "That's within my authority as a DNR officer, court order or not." Wells signaled to a burly foreman. "Remove them from the property." As the foreman approached, a strange sound rose above the storm. A chorus of yips, barks, and howls from the surrounding forest. Workers stopped, looking around nervously as the eerie chorus grew louder. Suddenly, animals began emerging from the tree line. Not just foxes now, but raccoons, deer, even a pair of coyotes. They formed a line between the construction equipment and the untouched forest. "What the hell?" the foreman muttered, backing away. The wildlife stood unnaturally still, watching the humans with collective intelligence that sent chills down Ruby's spine. This wasn't normal animal behavior. It was coordination. Purpose. A brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the scene, followed by a deafening crack. One of the massive oaks at the edge of the clearing, weakened by the recent excavation, groaned and began to topple toward the bulldozers. "Move!" Oliver shouted, pulling Ruby back as the workers scattered. The tree crashed down with devastating force, missing the workers but crushing the lead bulldozer. In the chaos that followed, no one noticed the ground beginning to shift beneath the heavy equipment. No one except the animals, which retreated as one, back toward the safety of the tree line. Ruby felt it first, a subtle tremor beneath her feet. "Oliver," she whispered, grabbing his arm, "the ground." Before he could respond, a section of the excavated area collapsed inward as the underground spring, swollen with rainwater, burst through. Mud and water gushed from the widening hole, swallowing a second bulldozer and sending workers running for safety. "Evacuate!" Wells shouted, his composure finally breaking. "Everyone out. Now." As the workers fled, Ruby noticed something alarming. The flood of water and mud was channeling directly toward the homes downstream, including the neighborhood where Oliver's mother lived with Lily. "The creek bridge," she shouted to Oliver over the storm. "If that mudslide hits it," he understood immediately. "It'll dam the creek and flood everything downstream." He was already running toward his truck. "We need to warn everyone." Ruby reached for her phone to call Oliver's mother, but the screen showed no signal. The storm had knocked out cell service. Cold dread washed over her as she realized they might not be able to alert everyone in time. As they sped toward the bridge, Ruby stared in horror at the wall of mud and debris flowing down through the forest, uprooting smaller trees and gathering deadly momentum. "We'll never beat it," Oliver said grimly, gripping the steering wheel as the truck fishtailed on the muddy road. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Ruby spotted something extraordinary through the rain-streaked window. Animals running alongside their truck, overtaking them, racing toward the threatened neighborhood. "Oliver, look." The foxes were in the lead, but dozens of creatures followed. Raccoons, opossums, even squirrels, all moving with singular purpose toward the homes in the flood's path. When they finally reached the bridge, Ruby was astonished to see lights on in every house along the creek. People were evacuating, carrying children and pets to higher ground. Oliver's mother stood on her porch, Lily safe in her arms, directing neighbors toward the community center on the hill. "How did they know?" Ruby asked as they pulled up, the evacuation already well underway. Oliver's mother approached, passing Lily to Ruby's eager arms. "The strangest thing," she said, still bewildered. "Animals started appearing at windows, scratching at doors. When we looked outside and saw them all gathered, something just told us to get to higher ground." She shook her head in wonder. "Some of the neighbors thought I was crazy until this little one said it too." Ruby looked down at Lily, who was watching the retreating animals with calm eyes. What did she say? Just one word, over and over: danger. As the community huddled in the safety of the hilltop center, they watched as the mudslide slammed into the creek bridge. The structure groaned but held, creating a temporary dam that sent water surging over its banks. But the houses, now empty, were the only casualties. "If we'd been sleeping when that hit," one neighbor said, voice trembling. "How did the animals know?" another wondered. Ruby held Lily close, watching as the mother fox and her kit appeared briefly at the edge of the center's parking lot, amber eyes reflecting the emergency lights before disappearing once more into the night. By morning, the storm had passed, revealing the extent of the damage. The collapsed construction site was a muddy crater. The creek had carved a new channel around the damaged bridge. Several homes had water damage, but remarkably, no one was hurt. Mayor Harrington arrived at the community center, his perfect hair disheveled, his face ashen as he surveyed the gathered residents. Harrison Wells was conspicuously absent. "I've just come from an emergency meeting with state officials," the mayor announced, his voice subdued. "The Creek Ridge development has been officially suspended, pending a full geological and environmental review. The state has also opened an investigation into whether Evergreen Development knowingly falsified environmental impact reports." A cheer rose from the gathered residents. Oliver caught Ruby's eye across the room, giving her a thumbs up. The mayor cleared his throat. "Furthermore, the council has unanimously voted to designate the entire Willow Creek watershed as a protected wildlife corridor." He looked directly at Ruby and Lily. "Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air, and sometimes it takes a small voice to awaken a community." As the impromptu celebration continued, Diana Sullivan approached Ruby with a legal document. "This petition has over 300 signatures, nearly half the town. We're proposing you head a new wildlife protection committee." Ruby stared at the paper in shock. "Me? But I've only lived here a few months." "Sometimes outsiders see most clearly what locals have forgotten," Diana said simply. "Besides, you have a pretty persuasive deputy." She smiled at Lily, who was contentedly playing with a toy fox Oliver had given her. Later that week, as normalcy slowly returned to Pine Haven, Ruby took Lily back to Willow Creek Bridge, or what remained of it. Construction crews were already at work, not destroying but rebuilding. A wider, more environmentally friendly crossing designed to accommodate both human and animal traffic. Oliver met them there, pointing out the wildlife tunnels being incorporated into the new design. The state's environmental office is using this as a model project now. They're calling it collaborative conservation. Ruby watched as Lily squirmed to be put down. Once on her feet, the toddler toddled to the creek bank and peered intently into the water. "Fish," she declared clearly, pointing at the minnows darting in the shallows. Ruby and Oliver exchanged startled looks. "Another new word," Ruby said, watching her daughter carefully. "She's learning so fast now." As the afternoon sun filtered through the remaining trees, the mother fox appeared on the opposite bank, her kit now noticeably larger trotting behind her. They paused, regarding the humans with that same unnerving intelligence. Lily waved enthusiastically. "Friend?" The mother fox yipped once, softly, before leading her kit along the bank and disappearing into the underbrush. "You know," Oliver said thoughtfully, "there are legends in many cultures about children who can communicate with animals, who understand them in ways adults cannot." Ruby watched her daughter, who was now babbling happily to a butterfly that had landed nearby. "What are you suggesting?" Oliver shrugged. "Nothing specific, just that sometimes connection goes deeper than we understand." He hesitated. "The way those animals warned everyone that night. I've been a wildlife officer for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like it." Ruby thought about the documents that had mysteriously appeared in her mailbox, the strange gathering of foxes at the creek, and her daughter's expanding vocabulary that always seemed to arrive at precisely the right moment. "Maybe," she said carefully, "we're not the only ones who can speak up for what matters." As they walked home along the new path that would eventually connect the entire wildlife corridor, Ruby noticed small stone markers appearing at regular intervals. Simple, unobtrusive piles that hadn't been there the day before. "Did the construction crew put these here?" she asked Oliver. He frowned, examining one. "No, this isn't their work. These look like trail markers, but not any official kind I've seen." Ruby touched one of the stones, feeling a strange warmth despite the cool day. Who would have placed them? As if in answer, Lily pointed toward the forest and said with perfect clarity, "Guardians." Oliver and Ruby exchanged glances, a mixture of wonder and unease passing between them. Whatever was happening in Pine Haven went beyond a simple wildlife corridor or a baby's precocious development. Something ancient was awakening in the forests around them. Something that had chosen a small child as its voice. That night, as Ruby tucked Lily into bed, she noticed a small red stone on the windowsill that hadn't been there before. Smooth, polished, and unnaturally warm to the touch. Outside, just visible in the gathering dusk, a circle of foxes sat beneath the oak tree in her backyard, their eyes reflecting the last light of day like tiny flames. Lily followed her gaze and smiled sleepily. "Family," she murmured, before drifting off to sleep. Ruby stood at the window long after the foxes had departed, contemplating the strange new world she and her daughter now inhabited, a world where the boundaries between human and animal, voice and silence, had somehow blurred. In the morning, she would find Harrison Wells waiting on her porch with an unexpected proposition. The state investigation would uncover generations of environmental corruption reaching far beyond Pine Haven. The wildlife corridor would expand to connect 3 counties, creating a precedent for conservation nationwide. And through it all, a baby's growing vocabulary would give voice to those who had been silenced too long, creating a bridge between worlds that was stronger than any concrete crossing. Ruby touched the warm red stone, now hanging from a simple cord around her neck. She no longer questioned how it had appeared or what power it might hold. Some mysteries, like some bonds, transcended explanation. She simply knew that in speaking for the voiceless, she and Lily had found their true home and their true purpose. The forest had guardians, and now, so did the guardians. In the distance, a fox called out into the night, the sound carrying clearly through Lily's open window. The sleeping baby smiled in her dreams, her small hand reaching out as if to answer. Dawn brought a strange mist that clung to the trees surrounding Ruby's property. She woke to find Harrison Wells's sleek black sedan parked in her driveway, the man himself sitting stiffly on her porch swing. His usual immaculate suit was rumpled, dark circles shadowing his eyes. Ruby hesitated in the doorway. Lily balanced on her hip. "Mr. Wells, this is unexpected." He stood, hands clasped behind his back. "Miss Chen, I believe we need to talk." Inside, Wells declined coffee, perching uncomfortably on the edge of her sofa, while Ruby settled Lily with breakfast. The developer's eyes kept darting to the red stone now hanging from Ruby's neck, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "I'll be direct," he said finally. "The state investigators arrived at my office at dawn. They're seizing documents, computers, everything related to Creek Ridge and a dozen other projects." Ruby waited, saying nothing. They had information they shouldn't have had. Specific details about soil samples, aquifer testing, species surveys. His gaze sharpened. "Information that was in those documents you somehow acquired." "I don't know what you're talking about," Ruby said carefully. Wells laughed without humor. "You don't need to protect your source, Miss Chen. I know exactly who leaked those files." He leaned forward. "My daughter." Ruby couldn't mask her surprise. "Your daughter?" "Amelia Wells, environmental science major at State University. Passionate, idealistic, determined to save the world from people like her father. Bitterness tinged his words. She's been accessing my servers for months. I knew, of course. I just never thought she'd go this far. From her high chair, Lily babbled suddenly, drawing both adults' attention. "Truth," she announced clearly, applesauce dripping from her chin. Wells stared at the child, then back at Ruby. "How old is she?" "Just over a year," Ruby answered, unnerved by his intensity. "Too young to be speaking in full sentences," he murmured, more to himself than Ruby, just like Amelia was. Ruby felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Mr. Wells, why are you here?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the forest. 30 years ago, before Pine Haven was developed, this entire area was old-growth forest. My father was the first to build here, establishing Wells Construction. He touched the glass, his reflection overlaying the trees beyond. The night before they broke ground, my mother took 3-year-old me camping on this very property. Ruby listened, sensing this story was leading somewhere crucial. I wandered off, got lost in the woods. They searched for hours. Wells' voice had grown distant. When they found me the next morning, I was curled up asleep in a hollow log, surrounded by a circle of foxes, completely unharmed. He turned to face Ruby. For years afterward, I could understand them, the animals. I knew what they wanted, what they feared. In her high chair, Lily had gone completely still, watching Wells with unnerving focus. My father called it an overactive imagination. My mother called it a blessing. Wells's hands clenched at his sides. By the time I was 10, the voices had faded. By 15, I'd convinced myself it had never happened. I followed my father into development, into progress, into... He gestured vaguely. All of this. "Why are you telling me this?" Ruby asked quietly. Wells' eyes fixed on the red stone at her throat. "Because I had one of those once. And because your daughter is showing the same signs Amelia did at her age. The same signs I did." His voice lowered. "The Guardians have chosen another speaker." Ruby's hand instinctively covered the stone. "The Guardians? That's what my mother called them, the ancient spirits of these woods." Wells looked embarrassed even as he said it. "Native legends speak of animal guides who choose human vessels to speak for the land when it's threatened. My mother was part Cherokee. She recognized the signs." He nodded toward Lily. "Unnaturally accelerated speech, affinity with animals, dreams that come true." Ruby thought of Lily's warnings before the flood, her seemingly impossible knowledge. "You can't seriously believe—" "What I believe doesn't matter," Wells interrupted. "What matters is that evergreen development is finished. The investigation will uncover environmental violations going back decades, my father's work and mine." His shoulders sagged. "I came to offer you a deal." Ruby tensed. "What kind of deal?" "The land. All of it. 900 acres surrounding Willow Creek, including your property." Wells pulled a thick envelope from his jacket. "I want to sign it over to a conservation trust. Permanently protected, never to be developed." Ruby stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that?" "Because Amelia asked me to. Because it's the only way to salvage anything from this mess." His composure cracked slightly. "And because 30 years ago, I made a promise to the fox that stayed with me all night in that hollow log. A promise I broke." Lily suddenly pointed at Wells, her small face solemn. "Remember," she said clearly. The developer paled, taking an involuntary step back. "She can't possibly—" He collected himself with visible effort. "The trust needs a director, someone who understands what's at stake." Amelia suggested you. Ruby's mind reeled at the implications. Mr. Wells, I'm a single mother with no conservation experience. I can't possibly— You already are, he cut in. That wildlife committee the town created? This would simply formalize it, with actual resources behind it. He placed the envelope on her coffee table. Everything's prepared, you just need to sign. Why me? Why not your daughter? A flash of pain crossed Wells's face. Amelia won't speak to me. Hasn't in years. Says she'll help with the scientific work, but wants no public association with the Wells name. He moved toward the door. Think about it. Let me know by tomorrow. After he left, Ruby sat with the unopened envelope, watching Lily play with her toys as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The red stone felt warm against her skin, pulsing like a tiny heartbeat. Her phone rang. Oliver calling with news about the state investigation. They're going through everything, he reported excitedly. Wells's company, the mayor's records, even historical permits going back to the town's founding. Something big is happening, Ruby. She told him about Wells's visit and his strange offer. Oliver was silent for a long moment. Do you believe him? About the guardians and all that? Ruby watched Lily, who was arranging her blocks in a pattern that looked remarkably like the stone markers they'd seen in the forest. I don't know what to believe anymore. If it's legitimate, that land trust would be huge. We're talking about the largest conservation easement in county history. Oliver sounded cautiously optimistic. But why would Wells surrender so completely? He said it was for his daughter. Ruby hesitated, and because of a promise he made as a child. Later that afternoon, Ruby strapped Lily into her stroller and walked to the public library. The Pine Haven Historical Society occupied a small room in the basement, its shelves lined with dusty archives and faded photographs. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Abernathy, looked up in surprise when Ruby asked about Native American legends local to the area. The Lenape were the primary tribe in this region, Mrs. Abernathy explained, pulling out a leather-bound volume. Though they were mostly gone by the time Pine Haven was established in 1879. She adjusted her glasses. Any particular aspect of their culture you're interested in? Anything about animal spirits, guardians of the forest, or people who could communicate with animals? Mrs. Abernathy's fingers stilled on the book's cover. Ah, you've heard about the speaker legend? Ruby's pulse quickened. Speaker legend? The librarian's voice dropped, though they were alone in the room. Every few generations, the forest spirits, the Manitou, choose a human vessel to speak for them when the balance between man and nature is threatened. She opened the book to a faded illustration of a circle of animals surrounding a small child. The chosen one is marked by their ability to understand the animal language and by their possession of a stone token. Ruby's hand unconsciously moved to the red stone at her throat. Mrs. Abernathy's eyes followed the movement, widening slightly. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "It appeared on my windowsill," Ruby admitted, feeling foolish saying it aloud. Mrs. Abernathy closed the book carefully. There hasn't been a confirmed speaker in Pine Haven since 1967. She stood with surprising agility for her age. "Come with me." She led Ruby to a locked cabinet in the corner of the room, retrieving a key from a chain around her neck. Inside were several leather-bound journals. She selected one, dated 1967 to 1972. "Rebecca Abernathy," Ruby read from the cover. "Any relation?" "My mother." Mrs. Abernathy, Eleanor according to her name tag, opened the journal to a marked page. She was the last speaker before the Wells boy. Ruby nearly dropped the journal. Harrison Wells was a speaker. Eleanor nodded grimly. Until he rejected it. My mother tried to guide him, but his father was determined to cure him of his delusions. She tapped a passage in the journal. Read this. The faded handwriting described a young boy who could predict animal movements, who spoke of conversations with foxes and ravens, who warned of dangers in the forest before they occurred. The entry ended ominously. Howard Wells has forbidden me from speaking to his son again. Says the boy needs science, not superstition. I fear what will happen if the gift is suppressed rather than guided. My mother watched for decades as the Wells family transformed Pine Haven from a forest community to a developing suburb. Eleanor's voice held years of restrained anger. Each time a new speaker should have emerged, something interfered. It was as if the connection between the forest and humanity was deliberately being severed. Ruby thought of Lily's rapidly expanding vocabulary, her strange affinity with the Fox family. And now the cycle begins again. Eleanor gently closed the journal. But this time, the forest has chosen more wisely. A child too young to be silenced, and a mother open to listening. As they talked further, Eleanor revealed that she'd been watching Ruby since the day she moved to Pine Haven. The forest has been restless for years. When you arrived with your daughter, the animals began behaving differently, organized, purposeful. Ruby remembered the unnatural gathering of foxes, the animals warning the townspeople before the flood. Why didn't you say something sooner? The speaker's guardian must discover the truth on their own, or the connection won't hold. Eleanor's aged hand covered Ruby's. The choice must be truly free. When Ruby left the library, her mind swimming with ancient legends and modern implications, she found Oliver waiting outside, his expression grave. Wells just held a press conference, he said without preamble. He's publicly announced the creation of the Willow Creek Conservation Trust, with you named as director. It's all over town. Ruby stared at him in shock. But I haven't agreed to anything. There's more. Oliver guided her to a bench, away from passing ears. The state investigators found evidence linking Mayor Harrington to environmental cover-ups going back 15 years. He's been taken in for questioning, along with half the town council. As Oliver continued detailing the rapidly unfolding scandal, Ruby noticed a familiar figure watching them from across the street. Diana Sullivan, the environmental lawyer who had helped organize the Wildlife Corridor supporters. She approached slowly, her professional demeanor at odds with the nervous energy in her movements. "You've been to see Eleanor," Diana said, nodding toward the library. It wasn't a question. Ruby studied her carefully. "You know about the speakers." Diana glanced at Lily, then back to Ruby. "My grandmother was Rebecca Abernathy's closest friend. I grew up hearing the stories." She hesitated. "When I moved back to Pine Haven last year, it was because Eleanor called me. Said the forest was preparing for something important." Oliver looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "Would someone please explain what's going on?" Before either woman could respond, Lily pointed toward the sky and said clearly, "Coming." They all looked up to see dark clouds gathering with unnatural speed, the air growing heavy with impending rain. But there was something else, a strange electrical charge that made the hair on Ruby's arms stand on end. "That's not a normal storm," Diana murmured. As if confirming her words, a bolt of lightning struck the town hall in the distance, the crack of thunder immediate and deafening. People on the street froze, then began hurrying for shelter as the fat raindrops started to fall. Ruby's phone rang, an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Ms. Chen." Harrison Wells's voice was tight with tension. "Where are you right now?" "Downtown, near the library. Why?" "Get to high ground immediately. The old dam above Pine Lake is showing signs of stress from the construction runoff. If it fails—" His voice cut out as the call dropped. Oliver was already on his DNR radio, trying to reach emergency services. "No response," he reported grimly. "The lightning must have hit their communications tower." Diana's expression hardened into resolve. "The community center is 3 blocks up. We need to start moving people there now." As the 3 of them began urging people off the streets, Ruby noticed something extraordinary. Animals were emerging from gardens, alleyways, and storm drains. Squirrels chattered urgently at passing humans. Birds swooped low to catch attention, and a group of raccoons actually tugged at people's clothing, trying to guide them uphill. "They're helping us evacuate," Ruby whispered, watching in awe as a mother deer and her fawn herded a confused elderly couple toward the community center. In her stroller, Lily was perfectly calm despite the storm raging around them. She pointed toward the lake at the edge of town. "Break soon," she announced. Oliver overheard. "How long?" he asked the toddler directly, no longer questioning the impossibility of the situation. Lily held up 3 tiny fingers. "3 what? Hours? Minutes?" The child frowned in concentration. "Soon," she repeated firmly. Taking no chances, they redoubled their evacuation efforts. Diana used her legal authority to trigger the emergency sirens manually, while Oliver coordinated with the few emergency personnel he could reach. Through it all, Ruby felt the red stone growing hotter against her skin, pulsing in rhythm with the approaching danger. Without conscious thought, she found herself drawn to the center of town, where a bronze statue of Pine Haven's founder stood in the square. The plaza was deserted, rain sheeting down as thunder cracked overhead. Ruby left Lily's stroller under the shelter of the gazebo and approached the statue, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain. The founder, Jeremiah Pine, stood with one hand extended, as if in welcome or warning. At the base of the statue, nearly obscured by decorative stonework, Ruby discovered a small carved depression, exactly the size and shape of her red stone. The realization hit her with shocking clarity. This wasn't just about saving a wildlife corridor or stopping one development. This was about reuniting a broken connection that had been deliberately severed generations ago. Her fingers trembling, Ruby removed the stone from around her neck and placed it in the carved hollow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stone began to glow with an inner light, its warmth spreading through the bronze statue and into the plaza stones beneath her feet. A deep rumbling shook the ground. Not an earthquake, but a response. The town square began to change before her eyes, the carefully manicured bushes growing wild and untamed in seconds, flowers blooming out of season, vines climbing the surrounding buildings. From the 4 corners of the plaza, clear springs erupted from beneath the pavement, converging to form a perfect circle of water around the statue. Ruby stepped back in awe as the water rose, not flooding but flowing with purpose into channels that hadn't existed moments before. Channels that precisely followed the ancient waterways that had existed before Pine Haven was built. Her phone rang again. Oliver, his voice breathless with disbelief. "Ruby, you won't believe this. The dam is holding, but the water's found some other outlet. It's flowing into old stream beds throughout town, beds that haven't held water in a century." As he spoke, Ruby watched the previously hidden waterways come alive throughout the town square, channeling the dangerous floodwaters safely around buildings, following a natural pattern older than the town itself. "The forest is reclaiming its waters," she murmured, understanding at last. When she returned to the gazebo where she'd left Lily's stroller, Ruby found Harrison Wells kneeling beside her daughter, his expression a mixture of awe and regret as he listened to the toddler's serious babble. "She remembers me," he said without looking up, "from before." "Before what?" "Before I was born, when I was part of the forest." Wells finally met Ruby's eyes, his own shining with unshed tears. "That's what she's trying to explain. The speakers aren't chosen, they're born from the forest itself. Old souls returning when needed." A flash of movement caught Ruby's attention. The mother fox and her kit had appeared at the edge of the square, watching the exchange with that same unsettling intelligence. Wells followed her gaze and nodded slowly. "My guides. They never really left me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a weathered stone, darker than Ruby's, but unmistakably similar. "I kept it hidden from my father. All these years, pretending I couldn't still hear them. Why come forward now? Because the balance is too far gone. Because my daughter showed me what I'd become." Wells placed his stone beside Lily's stroller. "And because the cycle needs to be completed properly this time." As Ruby watched, Lily picked up Wells's stone with her small hand, examining it curiously before holding it out toward the fox kit, who had approached silently through the rain. The kit took the stone gently in its mouth, eyes never leaving Lily's. "They've accepted the offering," Wells said softly. "The broken promise is mended." Later, as the strange storm subsided as quickly as it had formed, Ruby stood with Diana and Oliver at the edge of town, watching in amazement as the newly emerged waterways continued to flow, finding their ancient paths through Pine Haven. Already, residents were gathering at these unexpected streams, marveling at the sudden transformation of their community. "The Geological Survey team is completely baffled," Oliver reported, checking his phone messages. "They're calling it an unprecedented hydrogeological event." Diana smiled knowingly. "The Earth remembers its original design, even when humans try to reshape it." Ruby touched the hollow at her throat, where the stone had hung, finding it empty now. The stone remained with the statue. Its glow subsided, but its presence permanently part of the town's foundation. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now the real work begins," Diana replied. "The trust papers are legitimate. Wells has signed over the land as promised. As director, you'll have resources, authority, and a mandate to restore balance." Oliver's radio crackled with updates from emergency services. Miraculously, despite the severity of the storm, no serious injuries had been reported. The animals had done their work well, guiding people to safety before the waters rose. "And Lily?" Ruby asked, watching her daughter sleeping peacefully in her stroller, the excitement of the day having finally overtaken her. "The speaker's gift typically lasts through childhood," Diana explained. "According to the journals, most lose the direct animal communication as they mature, though the connection never fully disappears." The sky cleared as suddenly as it had darkened, revealing a double rainbow arching over Pine Haven. At its center, perfectly framed, stood the statue in the town square, its bronze surface now covered in a living tapestry of moss and vines. Mayor Harrington's temporary replacement, Councilmember Eleanor Thompson, the same grandmother who had Suppa